The haunting of room 217. The Stanley Hotel stood grandly against the backdrop of the snow-capped Rocky Mountains, its Victorian architecture glowing faintly under the pale moonlight. Tourists and thrill-seekers often flocked to its halls, drawn by its storied history and infamous reputation as a haunted haven. Room 217, however, was the epicenter of its ghostly lore, a room no staff member dared to enter alone after dark. Emma and Jack Morgan, a young couple with a shared love for ghost stories, decided to spend a weekend at the Stanley Hotel. Emma, an aspiring paranormal investigator, viewed the trip as an opportunity to expand her research. Jack, skeptical but curious, agreed reluctantly, more intrigued by the luxurious accommodations than the supposed hauntings. As they checked in, the receptionist's cheerful demeanor faltered when Emma requested room 217. "Are you sure?" the woman asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That room has a history." "That's exactly why we want it," Emma replied with a grin, ignoring the tightening grip of Jack's hand on her arm. The receptionist hesitated, then slid the key across the counter. "If you need anything," she said softly, "call the front desk. And keep the lights on." The door creaked open to reveal a meticulously preserved suite with antique furnishings, floral wallpaper, and an imposing four-poster bed. A chill hung in the air despite the roaring fireplace. "This is perfect," Emma exclaimed, setting her camera equipment on the dresser. Jack, less enthusiastic, rubbed his arms. "Feels like someone left the window open," he muttered, though the panes were sealed tightly. As they unpacked, Emma recounted the tale of Elizabeth Wilson, the head housekeeper from the early 1900s. According to legend, Elizabeth had been caught in a gas explosion while lighting lanterns in room 217. Though she survived, she passed away years later and allegedly returned to her room, tidying up after guests and reprimanding those who disrespected her space. "She's not malevolent," Emma assured. "She's just particular." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Particular enough to mess with us? Because I'm not in the mood for flying lampshades." Emma laughed, but her excitement masked an undercurrent of unease. Something about the room felt watchful. As night fell, the couple settled into bed. Emma positioned her camera to face the room, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. The hours crept by uneventfully until a faint tapping sound echoed from the adjoining bathroom. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, sitting up. Jack groaned, pulling the blanket over his head. "Probably the pipes." Old buildings creak. The tapping grew louder, sharper, as if nails were raking against porcelain. Emma grabbed her flashlight and ventured into the bathroom. The clawfoot tub stood empty, but condensation streaked the mirror, forming two distinct words. "Get out!" She stumbled backward, heart racing. Jack, now wide awake, appeared in the doorway. "What the hell is that?" he demanded, pointing at the mirror. "It's her," Emma whispered, clutching his arm. "Elizabeth." Jack shook his head. "This is ridiculous. You probably smeared that earlier with your fingers." "I didn't," Emma protested, but Jack had already returned to bed, grumbling. The next morning, Emma reviewed the footage from her camera. At first, there was nothing unusual, until 3:17 a.m. The screen flickered, and a shadowy figure crossed the frame, pausing briefly near the foot of the bed before vanishing. Emma gasped. "Jack, look at this." He leaned in, his skepticism wavering. "Maybe it's a trick of the light," he offered weakly. Determined, Emma decided to conduct a seance that evening. Jack protested but ultimately conceded, unwilling to leave her alone. As the clock struck midnight, Emma lit a circle of candles and placed a notebook on the floor. "If there are any spirits here," she called out, "we mean no harm. We just want to understand." For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the temperature plummeted. The candles flickered violently, and the notebook's pages began to turn on their own. A single word scrawled itself across the paper in jagged script. "Leave." Jack jumped to his feet. "Okay, that's it. We're leaving." Before Emma could respond, the room plunged into darkness. The fireplace extinguished, and an oppressive silence enveloped them. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling them. Emma clutched Jack's hand as a spectral figure materialized near the bed. It was a woman in a 1920s uniform, her face pale and emotionless, her eyes fixed on Emma. "You shouldn't be here," the apparition hissed. Jack's courage snapped. He grabbed Emma and bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind them, the ghost advanced, her translucent hand reaching out. "I'm sorry," Emma cried. "We'll leave. Please, just let us go." The figure paused, her gaze softening. Then, with a deafening crash, the door flew open. The couple didn't look back as they sprinted down the hallway, the sound of Elizabeth's voice echoing after them. "Don't come back." Back home, Emma uploaded the camera footage to her computer. As she watched, a final, chilling detail emerged. At the end of the seance, just before the room went dark, Elizabeth's face appeared inches from the lens. Her lips moved silently, but Emma could make out the words. "This is my home." Room 217 remained a mystery, its secrets locked within the walls of the Stanley Hotel. For Emma and Jack, it was a lesson learned. Some stories are better left untold. The ghost of Ballygally Castle. Perched on the rugged coast of Northern Ireland, Ballygally Castle stood as a haunting testament to time. Built in the early 17th century, its thick stone walls and towering turrets had witnessed centuries of history, joy, and tragedy. Now converted into a luxury hotel, the castle's allure extended beyond its picturesque location and elegant accommodations. Guests came for its ghostly reputation, particularly the tragic tale of Lady Isabella Shaw, whose restless spirit was said to linger in the castle's shadowy halls. When siblings Clara and Oliver Carter booked a weekend stay at Ballygally Castle, it was meant to be an adventurous getaway. Clara, a writer specializing in Gothic fiction, hoped the castle's ambience would inspire her next novel. Oliver, a history enthusiast, was eager to explore the building's storied past. From the moment they arrived, an unexplainable heaviness seemed to settle over them. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with a nervous smile, handed them a brass key. "You'll be in the turret room," she said, hesitating before adding. "It's a very historic part of the castle." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You mean it's haunted?" she teased, but the receptionist didn't laugh. "If you need anything," the woman said, leaning in slightly, "just call down. And if you hear a knock at your door, don't open it." Oliver chuckled nervously. "What happens if we do?" The receptionist's expression darkened. "Let's hope you don't find out." The turret room was everything Clara had imagined, and more. Its arched windows offered sweeping views of the wild Irish Sea, while the interior boasted an antique four-poster bed, a crackling fireplace, and centuries-old tapestries. Yet, an icy draft seemed to seep from the very walls, no matter how high they stoked the fire. Clara unpacked her notebook and began jotting down observations. Oliver wandered the room, running his fingers over the stone walls. "Did you know Lady Isabella Shaw was locked in this room?" he said, his voice echoing slightly. Clara nodded. Her husband, Lord Shaw, suspected her of infidelity. "They say he locked her up here, and when she tried to escape, she fell to her death from the window." "Fell," Oliver repeated. "Or jumped?" Clara shrugged. "Either way, they say her spirit still roams the castle." Guests claimed to hear knocking, whispers, and she hesitated. A cold presence. Oliver smirked. "Perfect for your book, right?" That night, Clara was awakened by a faint knock. She sat up, her heart pounding in the silence. The knock came again, deliberate and measured, echoing from the door to their room. "Oliver," she whispered, but her brother was sound asleep. Summoning her courage, Clara approached the door. "Hello," she called softly, but there was no answer. She reached for the doorknob, the receptionist's warning ringing in her ears. Before she could twist the handle, the temperature plummeted. Her breath fogged in the air as an icy gust swept through the room. Clara stumbled back, her heart racing. A faint voice seemed to whisper through the draft. "Help me!" When the morning light spilled through the windows, Clara dismissed the incident as a vivid dream. Oliver, however, was less skeptical when he found frost patterns on the inside of the window panes. "It's summer," he pointed out. "That doesn't just happen." Determined to uncover the truth, Clara and Oliver explored the castle the next day. They visited the small museum on the ground floor, which detailed the castle's history. A portrait of Lady Isabella caught Clara's eye. The young woman's face was serene, but her eyes held a haunting sadness. They never found her body, a guide explained, startling Clara. After she fell, the waves carried her away. Or so they say. What do you mean? Or so they say. Clara pressed. The guide hesitated. Some believe Lord Shaw had her body hidden to cover up the crime. That evening, Clara suggested conducting a séance in the turret room. Oliver was reluctant, but eventually agreed, unable to resist his sister's enthusiasm. Clara lit several candles and placed them in a circle on the floor. They joined hands as she began to speak. Lady Isabella, Clara called, her voice steady. If you're here, we mean no harm. We just want to understand your story. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the flames flickered violently. A chill swept through the room, extinguishing one of the candles. Oliver's grip on Clara's hand tightened. Isabella, Clara continued, are you trying to tell us something? The air grew heavier, and the faint sound of weeping filled the room. Clara's heart raced as the weeping turned into anguished sobs. Then, a shadowy figure began to take shape near the window. Lady Isabella's translucent form was unmistakable. Her long, flowing gown swayed as though caught in an invisible breeze, and her face was streaked with ghostly tears. He took everything, the apparition whispered, her voice trembling. My child, my freedom, my life. Clara felt a surge of empathy. Isabella, how can we help you? The ghost's gaze snapped to Clara, her expression shifting from sorrow to fury. You cannot, she hissed. He still holds me here. Before Clara could respond, the room erupted in chaos. The candles extinguished, plunging them into darkness. The furniture rattled violently, and the door slammed shut on its own. Oliver shouted as an unseen force yanked him toward the window. Let him go, Clara screamed, lunging for her brother. She grabbed his arm just as his feet left the ground. Together, they crashed to the floor, gasping for air. The room fell eerily silent. When they looked up, Isabella's ghost was gone, but her voice lingered, soft and mournful. Leave before he finds you too. Clara and Oliver packed their bags and left the castle at first light. As they drove away, Clara glanced back at the towering structure. In the turret room's window, a pale figure watched them, her sorrowful eyes following their retreat. Though they vowed never to return, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella's story was far from over. Her experience at Ballygally Castle became the basis for her next novel, a chilling tale of love, betrayal, and a spirit bound by grief. But Clara knew the truth. Some spirits cannot rest, and some stories demand to be told. The Whispering Shadows of Room 333. The Langham Hotel in London was the epitome of elegance, its opulent halls and towering spires a testament to Victorian grandeur. Yet, beneath its polished surface lay whispers of something darker. Among its many rooms, none was as infamous as Room 333, a suite steeped in ghostly lore and unnerving occurrences. It was said to be haunted by the spirit of a German prince who had tragically ended his life there before World War I. James and Claire Anderson, seasoned travel writers with a penchant for the macabre, decided to investigate the legend surrounding Room 333. Their followers eagerly anticipated the couple's first-hand account of the Langham's most haunted room. Upon their arrival, the concierge's demeanor shifted when they requested the suite. Room 333, he repeated, his voice tight with concern. Are you certain? Absolutely, James replied with a confident grin. We thrive on experiences like this. The concierge hesitated, but eventually handed over the ornate brass key. If you need anything, ring the desk, and perhaps avoid the mirror after 3 a.m. Claire's brow furrowed. The mirror? The concierge only shook his head, leaving the warning hanging ominously in the air. The suite was a vision of Victorian luxury. Velvet drapes, gilded furniture, and a full-length mirror framed in intricately carved mahogany. But the air felt heavy, as if the room itself held its breath. This is it, Claire murmured, setting down her bag. The heart of the stories. James unpacked their camera equipment while Claire examined the room. The mirror, mentioned by the concierge, stood prominently near the window. Its glass shimmered unnaturally, reflecting the dim light in unsettling ways. "It's just a mirror," James said dismissively when Claire voiced her unease. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her. They spent the evening recording their impressions and setting up motion sensors. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped sharply, despite the fireplace roaring in the corner. "Do you feel that?" Claire whispered. James nodded, his breath visible in the sudden chill. At 3 a.m., Claire woke to the sound of faint whispers. She turned to James, who was still asleep, then scanned the room. The whispers grew louder, emanating from the direction of the mirror. Heart pounding, she approached the glass. For a moment, her reflection stared back as expected. Then the image warped. The face in the mirror was not hers, but that of a man in a 19th century evening suit. His eyes were hollow, and his mouth moved as if speaking, though no sound escaped. Suddenly, the man reached toward her. Claire stumbled backward with a scream, waking James. "What happened?" he asked, rushing to her side. "The mirror," she gasped. There was someone in the mirror. James inspected it, finding only their reflections. "Claire, you're exhausted. It's probably your imagination." But Claire knew what she'd seen. The following day, they interviewed hotel staff and longtime guests. Tales of room 333 were consistent. Whispers at night, cold spots, and always the mirror. One former maid recounted seeing the man's reflection while cleaning, only to turn and find the room empty. "He's trapped in that mirror," she said, crossing herself. "And he's angry." That evening, James and Claire decided to conduct an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, session. As they asked questions, the recorder captured nothing at first. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the whispers returned, audible through the device. "Why are you here?" James asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension. The recorder played back a chilling response. "Betrayed." "By whom?" Claire pressed. "Everyone." The room's temperature plummeted again, and the mirror began to fog from the inside. A handprint appeared on the glass, followed by the faint outline of the prince's sorrowful face. James, emboldened by adrenaline, demanded answers. "What do you want from us?" The figure in the mirror suddenly slammed its hands against the glass, causing a deafening crash that sent both James and Claire reeling. The candles they'd lit extinguished simultaneously, plunging the room into darkness. Then came the sensation of being watched, not just from the mirror, but from every corner of the room. Shadows moved independently of the dim light filtering through the curtains. A voice echoed, not from the recorder, but the air itself. "Leave or suffer." Claire grabbed James's arm. "We need to go. Now." But the door wouldn't open. It was as if the room's very walls were conspiring to keep them there. The prince's reflection appeared once more, his face twisted in anguish. "You cannot escape," the voice hissed. In a moment of desperation, Claire remembered the concierge's warning. Avoid the mirror. But perhaps the mirror was the key. She seized a chair and hurled it at the glass. The mirror shattered into countless shards, each reflecting the prince's tormented visage. A blood-curdling scream erupted, shaking the walls, and then silence. The door creaked open, and the room's oppressive atmosphere lifted. James and Claire bolted into the hallway, hearts pounding. Back in the lobby, the concierge's expression was grim when he saw them. "You broke the mirror, didn't you?" "It was the only way," Claire said, trembling. The concierge sighed. "You may have released him. The room's curse isn't over." Though they left the Langham Hotel that night, neither James nor Claire could shake the feeling that they were being watched. Months later, while reviewing their footage, they noticed a chilling detail. In every clip, a shadow lingered just behind them, its shape unmistakably that of the man from room 333.